A certain ancient philosophy is being used to sell you a frantic modern lie. You have seen the quotes on social media, the videos promising Stoic secrets for unstoppable productivity and ruthless success. This is the language of hustle culture, and it has kidnapped a 2,000-year-old wisdom tradition, twisting its teachings into a manual for endless striving. By the end of this, you will understand not just how this happened, but how to reclaim a philosophy designed for peace, not panic. We are going to uncover what the real Stoics actually valued, and it had nothing to do with your follower count or your revenue goals. How did a pursuit of inner tranquility become a blueprint for chronic stress? The core of this entire misunderstanding lies in a single ancient word, eudaimonia. Aim of a Stoic life, and it translates not to success but to flourishing or a life well lived. Imagine the difference between a plant forced into rapid, unnatural growth under harsh lights and one that thrives steadily in the right soil and sunlight. Hustle culture is obsessed with the artificial, frantic growth, measuring every inch. Stoicism is concerned with the deep, resilient health of the roots. Eudaimonia is that state of deep-rooted flourishing. It comes from living in harmony with your own rational nature and the nature of the world around you. It is an internal condition, a sense of purpose and peace that exists regardless of what is happening outside of you. Now, contrast that with the modern hustle definition of success. It is almost entirely external. It is the number in your bank account, the title on your business card, the followers on your profile, the car in your driveway. These are the metrics, and they are always moving, always demanding more. The Stoics had a fascinating term for all of these things. They called them externals, or more precisely, indifferents. This does not mean they thought money or a good reputation were bad. They could be preferred. It is reasonable to prefer health over illness, comfort over hardship. But here is the crucial distinction. They are indifferent to your moral character and your ability to achieve eudaimonia. They are not the source of true happiness, and they are certainly not the proper goal of a life. Think of it like the weather. You might prefer a sunny day for a picnic. It is a preferred indifferent. A storm is a dispreferred indifferent. But your worth as a person, your inner tranquility, your virtue, these cannot be rained on. They exist separately. Hustle culture, however, sells you a story that the sunny day is not just preferred, it is essential. It tells you that your value is the sunshine, and without it, you are standing in a storm of your own failure. This inversion is profound. It takes a philosophy designed to make you immune to life's inevitable setbacks and twists it into a system that makes you perpetually vulnerable to them, because your entire sense of self is now tied to things you do not fully control. So when a Stoic sage spoke of being unshaken, they did not mean being the richest or most powerful person in the room. They meant that whether they were in a palace or a prison, their inner citadel, their capacity for virtue and rational action, remained intact. That is eudaimonia. The hustle culture version of Stoicism, however, would have you believe the goal is to own the palace, and that alone will build the inner citadel. The ancient teachers would say you have confused the scenery for the foundation. This fundamental confusion sets the stage for the most glaring modern misreading, the famous dichotomy of control. You have likely heard this Stoic idea simplified into a motivational slogan: focus only on what you can control. On the surface, that sounds like hustle culture gospel. Control your morning routine, control your work output, control your personal brand. It becomes a checklist for domination, a life hack for bending the world to your will. But this is a shallow and dangerous distortion of a deeply profound ethical principle. For the Stoics, the dichotomy was not a tool for productivity, it was a map for peace. Their entire point was to radically shrink the category of what we consider under our control. They argued that only three things truly fit: our judgments, our impulses, and our actions. Everything else, from our health and reputation to the weather and the stock market, falls into the vast domain of the uncontrollable. The hustle interpretation tells you to grab as much of that external world as possible and wrestle it into submission. The Stoic instruction is the opposite: to carefully discern what is yours and what is not, and then to release your grip on everything in the second category. This is not about controlling outcomes, it is about mastering your response to any outcome. Imagine two sailors. The first, the hustler, believes he can control the wind. He exhausts himself shouting at the sky, rigging elaborate contraptions to catch a breeze that will not come, tying his self-worth to reaching a specific island by noon. The second, the Stoic, focuses solely on adjusting his sails. He understands the wind is not his to command. His job is to use his skill and judgment to navigate whatever conditions arise with acceptance, not fury. His goal is not a specific destination on a specific timeline, but to sail well with virtue, no matter where the journey takes him. Hustle culture sells you the first sailor's exhausting delusion. It tells you that with enough effort you can command the wind, and when you inevitably cannot, it tells you that you simply did not hustle hard enough. This turns the philosophy into a source of perpetual anxiety because you are constantly at war with reality itself. The ancient Stoics spoke of living in accordance with nature, which included accepting the larger cosmic order. They taught a kind of intelligent surrender to the way things are, not a frantic campaign to dominate every variable. When Epictetus, a former slave, said that happiness begins with understanding what is yours and what is not, he was offering liberation from the very striving that defines modern hustle. He was saying your peace cannot be found in a promotion you might not get, but it can always be found in the integrity and diligence you bring to your work today. The hustle version misses the surrender entirely. It keeps you chained to the results, forever measuring your control by external rewards. The real dichotomy offers a quiet, unshakable freedom, the freedom to do your best and then to let go. This is where the ancient road diverges completely from the modern shortcut. For the Stoics, there was one, and only one, thing that could be called truly good virtue. Not wealth, not fame, not even perfect health, only the excellence of your own character. They broke this down into four cardinal virtues: wisdom to see the world clearly, courage to act rightly in the face of fear, justice to treat others with fairness, and temperance to exercise self-command over your desires and impulses. Everything else we chase, everything hustle culture sells as the ultimate prize, the Stoics placed in a separate category entirely. These were the preferred indifferents. They could be used well or poorly, but their presence or absence did not define a good life. You could be virtuous while poor, and you could be vicious while rich. The money itself was neutral, its moral weight came entirely from how you used it. Hustle culture turns this entire framework upside down. It treats the preferred indifference, the money, the growth, the status, as the primary goods. Virtue is then often reframed as a handy toolkit, a set of productivity hacks to help you acquire more of those externals. Courage becomes the audacity to cold call 100 clients. Temperance becomes the discipline to grind for 16 hours. Wisdom becomes the market insight to outmaneuver a competitor. These virtues are not pursued for their own sake, but are instrumentalized, turned into means to a worldly end. The ancient Stoics would say this misses the point entirely. For them, virtue was the end. The goal was not to use courage to get rich. The goal was to be courageous because courage is good in itself. Any external reward that followed was merely a welcome side effect, not the purpose. This creates a profound ethical litmus test that modern hustle rarely applies. For a Stoic, if an action requires you to compromise your virtue, it is not worth doing, period. No potential profit, no promise of success, No shortcut to growth could justify acting with injustice, cowardice, foolishness, or excess. Imagine a business opportunity that would double your revenue, but it involves misleading your customers or exploiting your employees. Hustle culture, in its relentless focus on the metric of growth, might find ways to rationalize it, to frame it as a necessary step on the path to a larger goal. The Stoic position is absolute and simple. You walk away. You walk away because you have damaged the only thing that is truly yours and truly good, your character. Compromising your justice for profit is like selling the foundation of your house to buy more furniture. You are left with impressive decorations in a structure that is fundamentally unsound. This is the forgotten foundation, the non-negotiable core. While hustle culture asks, "Will this make me successful?" Stoicism asks a more demanding and enduring question, "Will this make me good?" And in that quiet question lies a completely different compass for navigating life. This distinction between virtue and outcome leads us to the ultimate test of a philosophy, how it handles difficulty. The modern grindset mentality has a very clear posture toward obstacles. They are enemies, walls to be scaled through sheer force of will, barriers to be smashed with relentless effort. Every setback is a personal affront, a challenge to your ambition that must be conquered. This creates a relationship with life that is fundamentally adversarial. You are at war with your circumstances, and your worth is proven by your capacity to dominate them. It is a state of perpetual dissatisfaction because even in victory, you are already scanning the horizon for the next battle. The Stoics proposed a radical, almost counterintuitive alternative. They called it amor fati, a Latin phrase meaning a love of one's fate. This is not passive resignation. It is not about lying down and accepting whatever happens with a sigh. It is an active, profound embrace of every single event, especially the difficult ones, as necessary and even beneficial for your growth. The Stoic sees the same wall not as an enemy to destroy, but as the very material from which to build strength. The obstacle is not in the way, it is the way. Imagine a blacksmith working with iron. The grindset approach would be to rage against the hardness of the metal, to see its resistance as a flaw. The Stoic, practicing amor fati, understands that the metal's resistance is not a flaw. It is the essential quality that allows it to be forged into something strong. The fire and the hammer are not punishments, they are the necessary forces that shape it. Without them, the metal remains a soft, useless lump. This mindset transforms your entire experience of hardship. A professional setback is no longer a verdict on your failure, but an invitation to practice resilience and reconsider your path. A period of ill health becomes a teacher of patience and a reminder of what truly matters. Even profound loss, while deeply felt, can become a part of your story that deepens your capacity for compassion and understanding. The grindset says love only the victories. Amor fati asks you to find a way to love the process, including the stumbles, because they are inseparable from the person you are becoming. This is where challenges become opportunities to practice the very virtues we discussed. A difficult person in your life is not a nuisance to be eliminated. They are your training partner for patience and justice. A project that fails is not a waste. It is a lesson in wisdom and a test of your courage to begin again. The Stoic accepts reality as it is, not as they wish it to be, and then works with it creatively. The hustler fighting reality often exhausts themselves against immovable forces, mistaking their frustration for effort. One approach integrates difficulty into a meaningful life narrative. The other often feels like a series of exhausting battles with no lasting peace in sight. The real question is not how to conquer your fate, but whether you can learn to see it, even in its roughest moments, as a friend. This internal shift from fighting fate to embracing it requires a profound renegotiation with our own impulses. At the very heart of Stoic practice lies a quiet discipline, the management of desire and aversion. The ancient teachers proposed a startlingly simple rule: desire only that which is within your control, which is to say, desire only to act with virtue. Be averse only to acting viciously. Everything else, every other want and every other fear, is to be met with a calm indifference. This is the Stoic prescription for a tranquil mind, a cure for the fever of wanting. Now place this beside the engine of modern hustle culture. Its entire economy is built not on curbing desire, but on stoking it into an infinite, insatiable flame. You are told to want more revenue, a bigger audience, a faster growth curve, a newer status symbol. The message is never that you have enough, but that you are not enough until you have the next milestone. Even more telling, hustle culture often cultivates a powerful aversion to its natural opposites: rest, moderation, and simple contentment. These are framed not as wisdom, but as weaknesses, as signs you are losing your edge, getting lazy, or falling behind. To pause is to fail, to be satisfied is to be complacent. This creates a psychological trap of immense proportions. You are programmed to constantly desire something just out of reach, while simultaneously fearing the very states, rest and peace, that could actually restore you. It is a recipe for perpetual internal turmoil, a self-imposed state of lack and anxiety. The Stoics identified this exact pattern as the root of human suffering. They called it being a slave to your passions, to these unchecked desires and fears for things outside your power. Imagine your mind as a calm pond. Every uncontrolled desire is a stone of wanting thrown into it, creating ripples of agitation. Every unchecked aversion is a stone of fear. Hustle culture stands on the shore with an endless bucket of stones, telling you that throwing them faster is the path to success. Stoicism teaches you to put the bucket down, to watch the stones of external reward or failure sink to the bottom without letting them disturb your surface. Your job is not to chase the ripples, but to cultivate the stillness of the water itself. This is not about having no goals. It is about disentangling your happiness from their attainment. You can work diligently toward building a business. A Stoic would call this an action in accordance with duty. But you do not need the business to succeed in order to be at peace. Your desire is directed toward the virtue you bring to the work, your courage, your justice, your temperance in managing resources. The outcome, whether it flourishes or folds, is met with the same calm acceptance. The hustler, by contrast, ties their entire sense of self to the outcome. The work is not an expression of character, it is a transaction for validation. This is why burnout is so common in the grindset. It is not just physical exhaustion, it is the spiritual exhaustion of trying to control the uncontrollable. Your desires are infinite, but the world's capacity to satisfy them is not. You are left in a state of chronic wanting, mistaking the hunger for ambition. The Stoic asks a different question: not what do I want to have, but who do I want to be in the midst of the striving. That shift from external acquisition to internal cultivation is the quiet revolution that true Stoicism offers. It trades the exhausting hunger of more for the profound nourishment of enough. Yet this inner cultivation was never meant to be a solitary retreat. The Stoic pursuit of virtue had an essential, outward-facing dimension, one that modern hustle culture almost entirely ignores. The ancient Stoics understood humans as fundamentally social creatures, connected by our shared capacity for reason. From this flowed a core, non-negotiable virtue: justice. For them, justice was not merely a legal concept, but the active duty to treat every person with fairness, kindness, and a recognition of our common humanity. Your character was not perfected in a vacuum, but in how you moved through the world with others. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who ruled one of history's largest empires, constantly reminded himself in his private writings, "What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee." His purpose, even with ultimate power, was framed as service to the common good, to work for the benefit of humankind. A Stoic sees their life as a contribution to a larger whole, understanding that personal flourishing is intertwined with the well-being of the community. Now, listen to the dominant narrative of hyper-competitive hustle culture. It often champions a starkly different story, one of hyper-individualism. It is you against the world, every person for themselves. Success is frequently framed as a personal triumph over others, a zero-sum game where your win necessitates someone else's loss. Community, in this view, becomes transactional, a network to be leveraged. Connections are valued for their utility, for what they can do for your growth metric. This mindset creates a world of lonely competitors, all striving in parallel but never truly together, mistaking rivalry for purpose. The Stoic seeks to build bridges through justice. The hustler is often taught to view others as either rungs on a ladder or obstacles in their path. Consider two people building a business. The hustler, immersed in the hyper-individualist narrative, might see their team as instruments for execution, their customers as sources of revenue, and their competitors as enemies to be crushed. Their entire focus is on capturing value for themselves. The Stoic entrepreneur, while still aiming for a sustainable venture, operates from a different foundation. They see their team as a community with a shared purpose, deserving of fairness and respect. They view customers as fellow human beings to be served with integrity. They might even see competitors as part of a larger ecosystem that pushes everyone toward better service. Their drive is not to take from the world, but to add something of value to it. The metric shifts from what you extract to what you contribute. This is not naive idealism. It is a practical recognition that a life lived only for oneself is a fragile and ultimately lonely enterprise. The Stoic knows that our rational nature is social, meaning that to act against the common good is to act against our own nature, creating a kind of inner conflict no amount of external success can soothe. While hustle culture often isolates you on a mountaintop of your own making and calls it victory, Stoicism asks you to come down and help strengthen the city walls, understanding that true security and fulfillment are found in the strength of the community, not in the height of your personal tower. But this sense of community and shared purpose points toward an even deeper goal, a state of mind the Stoics considered the ultimate fruit of their practice. They called it Apatheia. This is a word often misunderstood today. It does not mean becoming an emotionless robot, indifferent to the world. The translation is closer to freedom from destructive passions. It is the tranquility that comes when you are no longer jerked around by every passing storm of fear, anger, or craving. Apatheia is the calm at the center, the resilience of a mind anchored in reason. Stoic resilience, then, is not about how much stress you can endure. It is about how little stress you need to create for yourself in the first place. It is the ability to face life's inevitable hardships with a clear, steady mind, not because you are toughing it out for a future reward, but because you understand the nature of the event and your own capacity to meet it. This resilience comes from rational understanding, from seeing a setback for what it is, a dispreferred indifferent, and then choosing a virtuous response. The strength is in the clarity and the choice, not in the sheer endurance of suffering. Now, listen to the language of modern hustle culture. It often glorifies the very opposite. Chronic stress is worn as a badge of honor. Burnout is framed not as a failure of the system, but as proof of your dedication. The no pain, no gain ethos is twisted from the gym into every aspect of life, suggesting that if you are not perpetually on the edge of exhaustion, you are not trying hard enough. This mindset mistakes suffering for strength. It confuses exhaustion with commitment. Imagine two climbers preparing to scale a mountain. The first, the Stoic, spends time studying the route, checking their gear, and cultivating a calm, focused mindset. They understand the mountain is dangerous, but their goal is to climb with skill and presence. The second, the hustler, believes the key is to simply endure more pain than anyone else. They might skip the preparation, ignore their limits, and push themselves into a state of utter depletion, believing that the sheer agony of the climb is what makes it worthy. One sees the mountain as a challenge to be met with wisdom. The other sees it as an enemy to be conquered through suffering. The Stoic aims to reach the summit with their faculties intact, having experienced the climb fully. The hustler often aims just to survive it, and they call that survival strength. This is a critical distinction. Hustle culture sells you a story where your value is proportional to your visible struggle. If you are not stressed, you are not important. If you are not burned out, you are not committed. It turns peace into a suspicious state, as if tranquility means you have given up. But the Stoics would argue that true strength is not found in the chaotic thrashing of someone drowning in their own workload. It is found in the steady, efficient strokes of the swimmer who knows how to move through the water without panic. Apatheia is that efficient stroke. It is the mental and emotional efficiency that comes from not wasting energy on fear about futures you cannot control, or rage about pasts you cannot change. That conserved energy is then available for what actually matters, for virtuous action in the present moment. The hustler, perpetually stressed, is like a car with the emergency brake always slightly engaged. They are moving forward but with tremendous friction, heat, and wear, mistaking the grinding noise for the sound of high performance. The Stoic ideal is to release that brake, to move through the world with less internal resistance. Their resilience is not a calloused toughness built from enduring endless friction. It is a supple, intelligent durability that comes from understanding how to reduce friction altogether. They are not stronger because they feel more pain. They are stronger because they have mastered the art of experiencing life without adding unnecessary pain to it. The question is not how much can you endure, but how clearly can you see, and how wisely can you act regardless of what you must endure. This subtle distinction between resilience and mere endurance brings us to the practical heart of the matter, the proper use of everything we chase. For the Stoics, wealth, reputation, even physical health were classified as preferred indifferents. They were not good in themselves, but they were the natural material a virtuous life could use. Think of them as tools in a workshop. A hammer is not a good or bad object. Its value depends entirely on the purpose it serves. In the hands of a skilled carpenter building a shelter, it is a wonderful instrument. In the hands of someone causing harm, it is a weapon. The tool itself is neutral. Its moral weight comes from the intention and the skill of the user. The Stoic aims to acquire these tools not for their own sake, but so they can be put to good use in service of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Money becomes a tool for providing security for your family, supporting your community, or creating something of value. A good reputation becomes a tool for building trust and fostering cooperation. Health becomes a tool for sustaining your energy to fulfill your duties. The tool is for the work, and the work is always the cultivation of virtue. Hustle culture performs a clever, almost invisible inversion here. It convinces you that the acquisition of the tool is the work itself. The goal shifts from using wealth wisely to simply accumulating as much wealth as possible. The metric of success is no longer the quality of the shelter you build, but the sheer number of hammers you own. This corrupts the entire enterprise from the inside out. A powerful analogy from the ancient world illustrates this perfectly. The Stoics compared life to a ball game. Imagine a game of soccer or basketball. What is the true goal for a player? It is to play with excellence, to demonstrate skill, strategy, sportsmanship, and teamwork. That is the virtue. The score on the board, the win or the loss, that is the external, the preferred indifferent. Of course you play to win. You prefer to see your score higher. But if you have played with all your skill, with integrity and courage, you have achieved the true goal of the game, regardless of the final numbers. A loss under those conditions is not a failure of character. Now, imagine a player who cares only about the score. They might cheat, they might harm an opponent, they might ignore their teammates, all to manipulate the numbers on the board. Even if they win, they have failed at the real game because they sacrificed the excellence of play for a mere result. Hustle culture has convinced us that life is only about the score. It tells us the win, the revenue number, the follower count is the sole measure of our worth. It encourages us to fixate on that board, to do whatever it takes to make it tick upward, often at the cost of the very qualities like fairness and balance that make the game meaningful in the first place. This shift fundamentally corrupts our decision-making. When the score is everything, every choice is filtered through a single, narrow question: will this increase my number? This can justify cutting corners on quality, overworking a team, neglecting personal relationships, or compromising ethical boundaries. The long-term health of your character and your community becomes a secondary concern to short-term metric growth. The Stoic, keeping their eye on playing well, asks a different question: will this action be just courageous, wise, and temperate? The resulting decision may sometimes lead to a lower short-term score, but it preserves the integrity of the player and the dignity of the game itself. Your life is not a spreadsheet to be optimized. It is a game to be played well with the tools you have for the sake of the play. When you forget that, you can win every battle on the board and still lose the reason you stepped onto the field. The ancient Stoics practiced a mental exercise that sounds at first like a recipe for anxiety. They called it the Premeditation of Evils. Each day, they would deliberately contemplate the potential loss of everything they held dear: their health, their loved ones, their possessions, their very freedom. They would visualize these hardships not with dread but with a calm, steady focus, asking themselves, if this happened, how would I respond? What virtues could I call upon? This was not pessimism but a profound form of psychological preparedness. By mentally rehearsing loss, they accomplished two vital things. First, they inoculated themselves against the shock of misfortune. When a difficulty arose, it was not a terrifying stranger at the door, but a familiar visitor they had already thought through. Second, and perhaps more beautifully, the practice instantly transformed their present moment. After mentally letting go of their health, the simple fact of breathing easily felt like a gift. After contemplating the loss of a companion, the sight of them became a moment of profound gratitude. This practice reduced attachment by revealing the temporary nature of all externals, not to make you cynical, but to make you appreciate the fragile, borrowed beauty of now. It was a tool to cultivate peace, a way to stare into the abyss and realize you still have solid ground beneath your feet. Now, listen to the mental soundtrack of modern hustle culture. It, too, is obsessed with the future, but its version of future thinking is not a calm premeditation. It is a frantic, anxious future tripping. It is the constant mental rehearsal of market crashes, competitor moves, personal failures, and lost opportunities. This is not a structured exercise for peace. It is an uncontrolled spiral of worry. The hustler lies awake at night visualizing their business failing, not to ask how they would respond with courage, but to stoke the fear that they must work even harder to prevent it. The Stoic practice aims to reduce anxiety by accepting the worst-case scenario as a possibility, thereby robbing it of its terrifying power. The hustle mindset uses the same mental imagery to amplify fear, turning it into a motivational whip. One is a fire drill, a calm preparation that makes the actual emergency less chaotic. The other is constantly screaming that the building is on fire, keeping you in a state of perpetual, exhausting alarm. This difference in intention changes everything. Negative visualization practiced correctly ends in a deep sigh of gratitude for what you have right now. Anxious future tripping ends in a knot in your stomach and a compulsive need to check your metrics again. One liberates you from the tyranny of what if. The other enslaves you to it. The Stoic seeks to be prepared for life's storms so they can appreciate the sunshine without fear. The hustler is often so busy scanning the horizon for clouds that they never feel the warmth on their skin. The sage knew they would never truly arrive. This is perhaps the most profound difference between the ancient ideal and its modern counterfeit. The Stoic sage was a hypothetical figure, a north star for navigation, not a destination you could ever claim to have reached. Think of the sage as a perfect horizon line, always receding as you walk toward it. The journey itself, the continual effort to align your judgments and actions with reason and virtue, that was the entire point. The ancient texts are filled with admissions of this struggle. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in his world, wrote private notes to himself filled with self-admonishment, reminders to be better, to resist irritation, to act justly even when it was difficult. He was not presenting a flawless persona to his empire. He was engaging in a raw, honest dialogue with his own imperfections. The sage was an ideal precisely because it was understood to be nearly impossible for a human to fully embody, and that acknowledgement of imperfection was the beginning of true wisdom. Now place this beside the archetype that dominates so much of modern hustle culture, the guru. This figure is not presented as a fellow traveler on a difficult road. They are positioned as having arrived. They stand on a self-constructed peak, broadcasting a curated image of flawless success, boundless energy, and unshakable certainty. Their value proposition is not a shared struggle toward wisdom, but a guaranteed formula they have mastered and can now sell to you. The message is not that the path is lifelong and hard, but that if you just buy their system, follow their 10 steps, and adopt their persona, you can shortcut the struggle and replicate their visible results. This creates a fundamental dishonesty at the core of the exchange. The Stoic ideal was rooted in humility and self-awareness, a clear-eyed recognition of one's own faults and the constant work required. The hustle guru archetype is often built on boastfulness and a carefully managed image, a highlight reel designed to mask doubt, failure, and the ordinary human messiness of a real life. One invites you into an honest, shared pursuit of character. The other sells you a finished mask. Consider the language each uses. The Stoic texts are full of questions, of wrestling with concepts, of acknowledging the pull of irrational impulses. Epictetus, a teacher, did not present himself as a sage. He presented himself as a fellow student of philosophy, urging his listeners to test every idea in the furnace of their own experience. The hustle guru, by contrast, often speaks in declarations and commandments. Their rhetoric is built on certainty, on eliminating doubt, on presenting life as a solvable equation if you simply have the right code. This difference in posture changes everything about the relationship with the audience. The Stoic teacher says, "Here is a difficult path I am also walking. Let us reason it out together." The guru says, "I have conquered the mountain. Here is the map, but you must pay for the version that leaves out all the times I fell and got lost." The pursuit of a sage like wisdom makes you more human, more connected to the shared flaws of humanity. The pursuit of a guru's persona often makes you more isolated, as you strive to hide your own struggles to measure up to an impossible, marketed standard. It turns the inner work of philosophy into an external performance. You are no longer concerned with whether you are acting with justice, but with whether you look like someone who has it all figured out. The ancient ideal was about becoming real. The modern archetype too often trains you in the art of appearing perfect, a performance that is exhausting, lonely, and ultimately empty because you are building a life for an audience instead of a soul. The most beautiful and misunderstood phrase in all of Stoicism is this: live according to nature. At first glance, it sounds almost primitive, as if they were telling us to sleep in caves and eat berries. But for the Stoics, nature was not just the wilderness. It was the entire rational, interconnected order of the cosmos, a vast and intelligent pattern of cause and effect. To live according to nature meant to align your own small, individual reason with that grand, universal reason. It was about finding your specific note and playing it in harmony with the symphony. This meant two things: understanding the world as it truly is, not as you wish it to be, and understanding your own human nature, with all its inherent capacities and its equally inherent limits. Your nature as a rational, social being meant your purpose was to use your reason wisely and to act with justice toward others. Your nature as a physical being meant you required rest, nourishment, and connection. Living according to nature was an act of integration, weaving your life into the fabric of reality with acceptance and intelligence. Now, place this serene, holistic ideal beside the battle cry of modern hustle culture. Its ethos is not one of harmony but of conquest. It speaks constantly of breaking limits, hacking biology, and optimizing every last inefficiency out of the human experience. In this worldview, natural human needs are not aspects of our nature to be respected. They are bugs in the system to be patched. The need for 8 hours of sleep is not a biological requirement. It is a productivity leak to be minimized with supplements and gadgets. The need for deep, unstructured reflection is not a source of wisdom. It is downtime that could be monetized. The need for genuine, non-transactional connection is not a cornerstone of well-being. It is a networking opportunity you are failing to capitalize on. This creates a human being perpetually at war with their own design. The Stoic seeks to listen to their nature, to understand its rhythms and work with them. The hustler is taught to override their nature, to shout it down with more caffeine and more ambition, mistaking the resulting strain for progress. Imagine a skilled sailor. They live according to the nature of the sea. They study the tides, they respect the storms, they understand the limits of their vessel. They do not rage against the ocean for being wet, or try to hack the wind to blow only from the west. Their mastery lies in their harmonious adaptation to the reality of their environment. The hustle culture sailor, by contrast, would try to install a rocket engine on their wooden hull, demand the sea be flat at all times, and see the very concept of a tide as a personal insult to their schedule. One finds a sustainable, graceful way to navigate. The other is engaged in an exhausting, futile fight against the fundamental rules of the medium they are in. This is the core of the divergence. The Stoic asks, what are the laws of this reality, and how can I live well within them? The hustler asks, which laws can I ignore, bend, or break to get what I want faster? One approach leads to a durable sense of place and peace. The other leads to a life of friction, where every natural limit feels like a cage and every human need feels like a weakness. When you treat your need for rest as an inefficiency, you are not becoming stronger, you are slowly disassembling your own foundation. The Stoic would see that need not as a flaw, but as a feature, a built-in signal from your nature that restoration is required for the long journey. To ignore it is not discipline, it is a profound failure to listen to the very wisdom of your own being. Living according to nature is ultimately about trust, trusting that the design of the universe and of yourself has a logic to it, and that flourishing comes from cooperation with that logic, not from a frantic rebellion against it. This is where the Stoic meditation on mortality offers a quiet revolution in perspective. The phrase Memento Mori, remember you must die, is perhaps the most famous and most misunderstood of their practices. It was never meant to be a morbid fixation or a source of dread. Instead, it was employed as the ultimate tool for prioritization, a lens to bring the truly important into sharp, urgent focus. By holding the finitude of life in mind, the trivial concerns that normally consume our days, the petty grievances, the social anxieties, the endless scrolling for external validation, are revealed for what they are: distractions. Against the backdrop of a limited existence, the only question that remains with any real weight is this: am I spending my time on what matters? And for the Stoic, what mattered was the cultivation of virtue and meaningful action aligned with it. The meditation was a call to live now, not frantically but fully, with intention. It asked, if this were your last day, would you be quarreling over that slight, or would you be seeking reconciliation? Would you be chasing another dollar for its own sake, or would you be ensuring your affairs were in order and your relationships were tended to with kindness? Memento Mori does not whisper that time is running out to achieve your worldly goals. It announces that time is precious, too precious to waste on anything but becoming a better human being. Now, listen to how mortality is often framed within the engine of hustle culture. Here, the awareness of a limited lifespan is not used to clarify values, but to manufacture a very specific kind of pressure. The message is not live well, but achieve more before it is too late. Your time is not a gift to be used wisely. It is a depleting resource in a race against others. This creates a frantic, time is running out panic that fuels compulsive work. The underlying fear is not that you will fail to live virtuously, but that you will fail to leave a mark, measured in wealth, fame, or influence on the world. This turns every moment of rest into a moment of guilt, a potential step behind in a race only you are running. The Stoic practice aims to free you from the tyranny of trivial pursuits. The hustle distortion aims to enslave you to a single, exhausting pursuit, using the fear of an ending to justify ignoring the quality of the journey. Consider two people standing before a large, beautiful hourglass. The first, practicing Memento Mori, watches the sand fall. They feel a gentle but firm nudge. They look at their to-do list and cross off the items born of vanity and insecurity. They pick up the phone to mend a fence with a friend. They choose to work on a project that serves others, not because it will make them famous, but because it feels meaningful. The sand reminds them to act, but with calm purpose. The second person, gripped by the hustle culture version of this idea, sees the same hourglass and feels only a lash of anxiety. They interpret the falling sand not as a reminder to live well, but as a countdown to their inevitable irrelevance. They frantically add more items to the list, demanding more of themselves, pushing harder, convinced that only a monumental external achievement can justify the sand that has already passed. One sees the hourglass and is inspired to remove the clutter. The other sees it and tries to cram more clutter in before the top empties. The same awareness of an ending produces two opposite reactions: thoughtful prioritization versus compulsive accumulation. The ancient practice was a tool for peace, a way to settle the mind by distinguishing the essential from the noise. When you remember that your time is limited, the opinions of strangers lose their power over you. The temptation to engage in fruitless conflict evaporates. The desire to acquire for the sake of acquisition seems hollow. Your energy naturally redirects toward what the Stoics called the examined life, a life of reflection, contribution, and character. The hustle culture distortion, however, uses that same awareness to agitate the mind. It amplifies the noise, telling you that you must be louder, richer, more visible than ever to beat the clock. It replaces the quiet question of virtue with the screaming demand for legacy, defined in purely external terms. One brings the profound clarity that comes from knowing what to ignore. The other brings the diffuse panic that comes from trying to attend to everything at once, lest you miss your one chance. In the end, Memento Mori does not ask you to build a monument. It asks you to become someone right now who needs no monument to have lived a life of value. That relentless race against the hourglass creates a peculiar psychological illusion. Hustle culture operates on a horizon that constantly, deliberately recedes. No matter how fast you run, the finish line moves further away. There is never enough money because enough is always just a little more than you have. There is never enough status because someone else always has a higher platform. There is never enough growth because the graph must always curve upward forever. This is not an accidental feature of the system, it is the engine. An insatiable cycle is built into the design because the moment you believe you have enough, you stop consuming the product, which is the promise of more. You are sold a state of permanent becoming where arrival would mean the end of the dream, so the dream must be structured to ensure you never arrive. Your sense of self becomes tied to the chase itself, leaving you in a state of chronic dissatisfaction, mistaking the hunger for the meal. The Stoics proposed a radical alternative to this infinite horizon. They sought a different kind of enough, one found not in the external world, but in the sufficiency of virtue. For them, enough was not a quantity to be acquired, but a quality to be cultivated. It was the deep, resonant knowledge that in this very moment you possess everything required to act with wisdom, courage, justice, and self-command. Your character, your capacity for rational choice, is a complete toolkit. You do not need to wait for a promotion to be courageous. You do not need 1,000,000 followers to be just. You do not need a perfect body to exercise temperance. The virtue is available now, and in its exercise you find a profound sense of completeness. This is the practice of contentment, not with complacency, but with the present moment's opportunity for excellence. It is saying what I have right here is enough to begin the work of being good. Imagine two gardeners. The first, caught in the hustle mindset, is never satisfied. Their garden is never full enough, colorful enough, impressive enough compared to the neighbors. They are constantly buying new seeds, uprooting healthy plants to make room for trendier ones, exhausting the soil in a quest for a picture-perfect result they saw online. They are so busy acquiring and comparing that they rarely feel the soil in their hands or notice the subtle beauty of a single blooming flower. The second gardener, approaching their plot with a stoic sense of enough, begins by assessing the tools they have, the seeds on hand, the sunlight available. Their goal is not to create the world's most famous garden, but to tend this patch of earth with excellence right now. They find contentment in the act of nurturing what is already growing, knowing that skillful care is its own reward. Their garden may be smaller, but their experience of it is rich, immediate, and free from the anxiety of constant comparison. One is chasing a phantom image of enough that always lies in the future. The other discovers enough in the mindful attention of the present task. This stoic enough is anchored in a distinction between wanting and choosing. Hustle culture amplifies wanting, an emotional state of lack that demands to be filled from outside. Stoicism focuses on choosing, a rational action taken from a position of existing wholeness. When you operate from virtue, you are not desperately wanting success to feel complete. You are choosing to act with integrity, and success may or may not follow as a byproduct. Your sense of worth is not deferred until the outcome arrives. It is confirmed in the choosing itself. This transforms your relationship with work entirely. The hustle artist works to become enough. The Stoic works because they already are enough, and their action is an expression of that sufficiency. One is a frantic attempt to fill a perceived void. The other is a calm overflow from a source that is already full. The beautiful, practical result of this mindset is that it liberates your ambition from your anxiety. You can strive, build, and create not from a place of fear that you are inadequate, but from a place of strength that you have something of value to offer. The goal shifts from acquiring enough to prove yourself to contributing enough because you are already grounded. This is how the Stoic finds completeness in the present moment of virtuous action. It is not a passive acceptance of mediocrity. It is an active, vibrant engagement with reality as it is, using the tools of character you already possess. While hustle culture keeps you leaning into a future that never comes, Stoicism asks you to stand firm in a present that is already rich with the possibility of good. The question changes from what do I need to get to what can I do with what I already have. And in that shift, the receding horizon finally stops moving because you have stopped chasing it, and instead, you have begun to build something real right where you stand. That sense of enough transforms how we view the very thing hustle culture worships as an end in itself. The the Stoics had a complex, almost wary relationship with wealth, viewing it not as a trophy but as a responsibility. In his essay on the happy life, the Roman philosopher Seneca, a man of immense personal fortune, did not celebrate his riches. Instead, he offered a stark warning. He wrote that wealth is a heavy burden and that to carry it without being crushed requires tremendous care and a light touch. For Seneca, the danger was not in having money but in being had by it. The wealthy person, he suggested, must practice a kind of vigilant detachment, holding their fortune loosely, as if it were something they were merely looking after for a time. They must be ready to let it go without their inner peace going with it. This is a far cry from seeing a bank statement as a scorecard. It frames wealth as a test of character, a demanding tool that can easily master the one who wields it. The goal is not to amass more, but to learn how to not be corrupted by what you already have. Think of it like piloting a large ship. The hustle culture captain sees the size of the vessel as the only measure of success, constantly wanting a bigger one. The Stoic captain, following Seneca's advice, understands that a larger ship is harder to steer, more vulnerable to storms, and requires greater skill to navigate safely. Their focus is not on the tonnage but on their own seamanship. Can they manage this responsibility without running aground on the rocks of arrogance, anxiety, or greed? The wealth itself is neutral, but its weight demands virtue to carry it well. Now, place this cautious, managerial view beside the unrestrained celebration of accumulation in modern hustle culture. Here, wealth is rarely presented as a burden or a test. It is an unambiguous good, a glittering finish line, the clearest and most desired proof that you have lived well. Its accumulation is the central plot of the story, the primary metric that drowns out all others. This view strips wealth of its moral complexity. It ignores Seneca's warning entirely, encouraging you not to hold it lightly, but to clutch it tightly as the source of your identity and security. When wealth is the supreme goal, every decision is filtered through a single lens. Will this make me richer? This lens can distort everything. It can turn relationships into networks, passions into side hustles, and time into a currency to be spent only on activities with a measurable return. The hustle narrative forgets that money is a tool and begins to treat it as the masterpiece. The Stoic asks, what good can this tool create? The hustler is often taught to ask, how can I get more tools? One leads to a life of considered contribution. The other can lead to a life of endless acquisition, where the garage is full of expensive, unused equipment, and the real work never begins. Seneca's idea of holding wealth lightly is the ultimate safeguard against this emptiness. It means you are free to use money for genuine good, for providing security, for creating beauty, for alleviating hardship in others, because you are not emotionally fused to it. You are its steward, not its slave. The hustler who ties their soul to their net worth, however, becomes a prisoner of the market's whims. Every dip causes panic, every comparison breeds insecurity. Their burden, as Seneca predicted, becomes crushing because they are carrying the weight of their entire self-worth on top of the financial weight. The ancient view offers a liberating paradox. You can only truly use wealth well when you are fully prepared to lose it without losing yourself. This is the nuanced care that gets lost in the modern celebration. The Stoic does not see a rich person and think they have one. They look and wonder, how well are they carrying that load? This inward focus transforms discipline from a grueling chore into a quiet art. For the Stoics, the word they used was ascesis, from which we get asceticism. But do not let that word fool you. This was not about self-punishment or deprivation for its own sake. Ascesis was a form of training, much like an athlete preparing for the games. The athlete's training is not the performance itself. It is the private, often tedious work that makes a graceful public performance possible. For the Stoic, the Gymnasium was their own mind. The weights they lifted were not physical but mental and emotional. They practiced patience in the face of irritation. They rehearsed courage by confronting small fears. They exercised justice by deliberately considering the perspectives of others. This training was entirely internal, aimed at strengthening the core muscles of character, so that when life presented its real challenges, they would not be caught off guard. The goal of this discipline was self-mastery, the ability to align your impulses and actions with your rational understanding of what is good. It was about becoming the authoritative captain of your own soul, not to conquer external seas, but to ensure your inner vessel was seaworthy, no matter the weather. The measure of success was a quiet conscience and a steady mind, not a crossed-off to-do list. Now, observe how hustle culture has quietly repackaged this ancient concept. Discipline, in its modern entrepreneurial guise, has been almost completely externalized. It is no longer primarily about training your character. It is a system for optimizing your output. The focus shifts from who you are becoming on the inside to what you are producing on the outside. The metrics are no longer peace, clarity, or integrity. They are hours logged, tasks completed, revenue generated, content published. The 5 a.m. wake-up call is not practiced to enjoy the quiet dawn for reflection, but to squeeze 2 more productive hours from the day before the competition wakes up. The cold shower is not an exercise in temperance to remind yourself that comfort is not a necessity, but a biohack to boost adrenaline and willpower for the grind ahead. Even the meditation that might be recommended is often framed not as a path to self-knowledge, but as a tool to clear mental clutter for sharper focus and better decision-making in business. In every case, the inner state is instrumentalized, made to serve the outer result. The hustle version of discipline asks, what can I force myself to do to get more? The Stoic version asks, what can I practice within myself to need less from the world? This is a seismic shift in intention. One builds a resilient character capable of facing any fortune. The other often builds a brittle persona capable of generating a specific fortune, but one that may shatter the moment the market shifts or the energy runs out. Think of 2 sculptors. The first, the Stoic, spends years mastering the feel of the clay, the grain of the wood, the swing of the hammer. Their discipline is in understanding their materials and their own limits. They may produce fewer finished pieces, but each one emerges from a deep conversation between the artisan and their craft. The second sculptor, the hustler, is focused solely on the number of statues leaving the workshop. Their discipline is in streamlining the process, minimizing time per piece, and maximizing output for the gallery. They may become very efficient, but the work risks becoming repetitive, soulless, a product of a system rather than an expression of a deepening skill. One discipline enriches the artist, the other merely scales the operation, often at the cost of the art itself. When discipline is only a means to an external end, it becomes a kind of self-imposed tyranny. You are the slave driver and the slave, constantly whipping yourself to produce more, achieve more, acquire more. The original Stoic training was meant to liberate you from being a slave to your own passions. The modern distortion ironically re-enslaves you to a new master, the insatiable god of productivity. Your worth becomes a function of your output, and so you must discipline yourself to never stop producing. This turns a philosophy of peace into an engine of quiet panic. The ancient ascesis was a path to inner freedom. The hustle discipline is too often a cage of endless doing, where the ultimate fear is not failing to be virtuous, but failing to be productive. And in that fear, the original purpose of the training, the cultivation of a good and tranquil life, is completely lost. This deep, internal training required a specific kind of fuel, one that hustle culture has nearly forgotten how to provide. The ancient world had a word for this essential nourishment, otium. In Latin, it meant leisure, but not in the sense of idle laziness or passive entertainment. Otium was the fertile space of contemplation, the uninterrupted time dedicated to study, reflection, and philosophical conversation. It was the quiet field where the seeds of wisdom could actually take root. For the Stoics and other classical thinkers, this was not a luxury. It was a non-negotiable requirement for a life well lived. You could not cultivate virtue in a state of constant distraction. You needed otium to examine your judgments, to consider your actions, to align your life with nature. This was the work of being human, and it demanded open, unscheduled hours. Seneca wrote passionately about guarding this time, arguing that a life without periods of deep leisure was not a life at all, but a perpetual, busy postponement of living. The philosopher needed to retreat from the public hustle of the forum, the negotium, to do the real work of understanding. Now, listen to the modern soundtrack. In hustle culture, non-productive time is not just inefficient, it is often framed as a moral failing. Every moment not spent directly advancing a goal, generating revenue, or building your brand is seen as wasted, or worse, as a sign of weak character. The idea of sitting quietly with a book, taking a long walk with no podcast in your ears, or simply staring out a window in thought, these are recast as unaffordable luxuries, indulgences for those who are not serious about success. Reflection is treated as a frivolous pause in the real work of doing. The Stoics saw reflection as the very core of the work itself. This creates a fundamental poverty of insight. The hustler is always in motion, mistaking movement for progress. They are generating output, but they are rarely examining the quality or the direction of that output from a place of depth. They are answering emails, but they are not asking if their work has meaning. They are building a platform, but they are not contemplating what they truly want to say from it. They are running a race, but they never stop to check if they are on the right track, because stopping would mean losing ground. Otium is the act of stopping to read the map. Without it, you can have tremendous velocity and still be hopelessly lost. Imagine two craftsmen in a woodshop. The first, embodying the hustle mindset, measures his worth by the sheer pile of wood shavings on the floor. He saws, planes, and assembles without pause, focused only on the number of completed boxes leaving his bench. The second craftsman, honoring the spirit of otium, will periodically stop. He will sit with a piece of wood, studying its grain. He will put his tools down to sketch a new design. He will spend an afternoon reading about traditional joinery. From the outside, the first craftsman appears vastly more productive, but the second, through his contemplative pauses, is not wasting time. He is deepening his craft. His eventual boxes are not just assembled, they are understood, and that understanding leads to work of greater integrity, beauty, and durability. One is producing quantity. The other is cultivating quality, and that requires the open space of thought. The modern world has replaced otium with a shallow cousin, entertainment. We fill every spare second with scrolling, streaming, and consuming, believing we are relaxing. But this is not contemplation, it is distraction. It is a numbing of the mind, not a nourishing of it. The Stoics sought leisure to engage more deeply with reality, not to escape from it. The constant digital noise leaves no room for the inner dialogue that Seneca cherished. The result is a life of action devoid of wisdom, a frantic painting on a canvas you never step back to look at. You become a human doing, not a human being. The ancient philosophers understood that to know how to act in the world, you first needed to sit quietly and understand your place within it. That understanding was not a waste of time. It was the only thing that made all the other time worth spending. This mantra echoes through every corner of hustle culture, a sharp command disguised as empowerment. No excuses. On the surface, it sounds like the ultimate call to personal responsibility, a warrior's cry against procrastination and weakness. It is the fuel for those 5 a.m. alarms and the guilt that follows any moment of rest. It promises that if you simply eliminate all reasons for not succeeding, success will have no choice but to arrive. But when held against the clear mirror of Stoic thought, this slogan reveals itself as a blunt instrument, one that often does more harm than the inertia it claims to fight. The Stoics were indeed the original philosophers of radical responsibility. Epictetus began his entire teaching by stating that happiness and freedom begin with understanding what is ours and what is not. This is a call to own your judgments, your choices, your actions with unwavering clarity. There is no room for blaming the weather, the market, or another person for your own vicious reactions. You are the captain of your inner world, yet this profound ownership is not the same as the brutal, simplistic denial of the no excuses mindset. The Stoic practice is one of rational assessment, not ruthless denial. It involves a careful, honest inventory of reality. What is truly within my power right now? What are the actual constraints? This assessment includes a compassionate understanding of your own human limits, your energy, your knowledge, your emotional state. To ignore these is not discipline, it is a failure to use reason. Imagine a farmer. The Stoic farmer takes full responsibility for preparing the soil, selecting the seeds, and tending the crops. These actions are within their control, but if a sudden, severe drought strikes, the rational assessment is not to shout no excuses and demand the crops grow without water. That would be a denial of reality. The responsible, virtuous response is to acknowledge the limit, the circumstance outside of their control, and then to decide how to act within this new reality. Perhaps they focus on conserving what water remains or shifting to more resilient crops for the future. The no excuses farmer, by contrast, might exhaust themselves and their resources in a futile attempt to water a vast field with a single bucket, seeing their inevitable failure not as a natural event, but as a personal moral failing. They blame themselves for not hustling hard enough to change the weather. This is where the slogan becomes cruel. It collapses the vital Stoic distinction between what is up to us and what is not. It takes every external circumstance, every human limitation, and recasts it as an internal flaw of willpower. Did not get the promotion, you must have made excuses. Feeling exhausted and unable to focus, that is just an excuse to be lazy. This mindset denies the complex texture of reality, where actual obstacles exist, where energy is finite, where circumstances can be genuinely difficult. It replaces the Stoics' clear-eyed acceptance with a punitive fantasy of total control. The result is often a deep, quiet self-recrimination, a constant background noise of not being enough, because if you were truly without excuses, you would have achieved everything you desire by now. It also trains you to ignore legitimate needs, especially your own. The need for rest becomes laziness. The need for recovery after an illness becomes weakness. The need to process an emotional loss becomes a distraction. By labeling these human experiences as excuses, you learn to override your body's and mind's signals, mistaking self-neglect for strength. The Stoic aim was self-mastery through wisdom, which includes knowing when to rest and restore the instrument of your will. The no excuses mantra, too, often leads to breaking that instrument out of a misguided sense of duty. True Stoic responsibility is not about denying the existence of limits, but about exercising impeccable virtue within them. It is the courage to say, "This is the reality I face, and within it, here is how I will act with integrity." That is a far more demanding and ultimately more sustainable form of power than simply shouting down any voice that speaks of difficulty. One builds resilience through intelligent adaptation. The other often builds a brittle facade that can shatter when reality refuses to comply with the slogan. That brutal denial of our shared limits creates a world of isolated competitors, but the Stoics envisioned something far more connected. They introduced a revolutionary idea for their time, cosmopolitanism. The word comes from the Greek for cosmos, meaning universe, and polites, meaning citizen. A Stoic was to see themselves first and foremost as a citizen of the entire world, bound to every other human by the shared spark of reason. This was not a vague metaphor, but a practical framework for the virtue of justice. If we all partake in the same rational nature, then every person, regardless of their origin, status, or proximity to us, deserves a baseline of respect and fair treatment. Your duty extended beyond your family, your city-state, or your ethnic group. It encompassed the whole human family. Justice became a global project, starting with how you perceived the stranger. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that rational beings were created for cooperation, like pairs of hands or eyelids. He saw his role as emperor not as ruling over subjects, but as providing for fellow citizens of the same great cosmic city. This mindset dissolves the instinct for tribalism. When you view humanity as your primary tribe, the artificial walls between us start to look like what they are: temporary and largely arbitrary. Now, listen to the social landscape often cultivated within competitive hustle spaces. The language is frequently tribal. It is about building your tribe, finding your circle, creating an inner sanctum of high performers. While community is vital, the underlying psychology here often defaults to an in-group, out-group dynamic. People outside your immediate bubble, your niche, or your level of perceived success are subtly categorized. They might be seen as competitors to be outmaneuvered, as marks for your marketing funnel, or simply as irrelevant background noise because they are not on the same path. The world becomes divided into us, the hustlers, the grinders, the awake, and them, everyone else. This tribalism is a direct contraction of cosmopolitan justice. It restricts our circle of concern to those who are useful to our goals or who validate our chosen identity. The Stoic asks you to expand your circle to include every rational being. The hustle mindset often trains you to contract it, to focus your energy and empathy only on those who can help you climb. Consider two business owners. The first, operating with a Stoic cosmopolitan view, sees their competitors as part of the same ecosystem. They might share knowledge, refer clients when appropriate, and view market success not as a zero-sum game where others must lose for them to win, but as a sign of a healthy industry that benefits all customers. They treat their employees not as human resources, but as fellow citizens in the venture, deserving of fair wages and dignified conditions. The second owner, immersed in hustle tribalism, sees the world as a battlefield. Competitors are enemies to be crushed, employees are costs to be minimized, customers are numbers on a spreadsheet. Their circle of justice is tiny, perhaps including only themselves and their immediate investors. Their success is measured by their dominance over the out-group. One builds upon a foundation of shared humanity. The other builds upon a foundation of perpetual rivalry. This tribal thinking is not just ethically narrow, it is psychologically exhausting. Maintaining an us versus them narrative requires constant vigilance, comparison, and often a subtle dehumanization of those on the other side. You must believe your group is inherently superior or more deserving, which is a fragile story that can shatter with a single setback. The cosmopolitan view, however, offers a profound stability. Your sense of belonging is not conditional on being in the right club or beating the right rivals. It is rooted in the unshakable fact of your membership in the human race. Your worth is not contingent on outperforming them. It is inherent in your shared capacity for reason. This transforms how you handle conflict. The tribal hustler sees a critic as an enemy to be silenced. The Stoic cosmopolitan sees a critic as another citizen offering feedback, which can be evaluated rationally, accepted if it is just, or dismissed without malice if it is not. One reaction breeds resentment and endless feuds. The other maintains peace and leaves the door open for dialogue. The ancient ideal challenges us to do the hardest work of justice, to extend fairness not just to those who are like us or useful to us, but to the distant stranger, the disagreeable opponent, the person whose success we might envy. It asks us to see our hustle not as a private war for spoils, but as our particular role, our station, in the vast, interconnected project of humankind. While one mindset builds walls and calls them fortresses, the other builds bridges and understands that true security lies in the strength of the entire city, not just your own guarded gate. This love for a dramatic origin story is everywhere in the entrepreneurial world. We are captivated by the founder who started in a garage, the artist who overcame immense hardship, the athlete who defied every odd. Hustle culture thrives on these narratives, but it tends to fixate on a very specific part of the arc, the triumphant ending where the struggle finally pays off in wealth, fame, or power. The adversity is framed as a necessary but unfortunate prelude, a dark valley you had to cross to reach the sunny uplands of success. The moral of the story becomes clear: endure enough pain, and you will be rewarded with the external prizes. It is a transaction, suffering for gain. The focus is almost entirely on what was conquered in the world, not what was forged within the person. The story says, "Look what I got because I suffered." The internal transformation, if mentioned, is usually presented as a side effect, a newfound toughness useful for closing the next big deal. But this misses the deeper, more ancient understanding of why hardship matters at all. The Stoics saw adversity not as a tunnel to be endured on the way to a light, but as the light itself, the illuminating fire that reveals and refines character. For them, the real arena was not the external battlefield for riches, but the internal gymnasium for virtue. The difficulty was not the price of admission to a better life, it was the very equipment used to build a better self. When you are comfortable, your virtues can remain theoretical, untested. It is easy to be patient when nothing irritates you. It is simple to be courageous when there is nothing to fear. But place a person under pressure, in loss, in uncertainty, in pain, and their true character is revealed not to the world but to themselves. This is the Stoic Gymnasium. The sleepless night worrying over a failing project is not just a problem to solve, it is your session for practicing courage and resilience. The difficult colleague is not merely an office nuisance, they are your sparring partner for patience and justice. The market downturn that threatens your livelihood is not a pure catastrophe, it is the heavy weight that tests your temperance and wisdom. The victory in this framework is not what you acquire after the hardship, but who you become in the midst of it. The internal victory of maintaining your integrity, your compassion, your clear judgment when everything seems to be falling apart, that is the real win. It is a victory that cannot be taken from you by a stock market crash or a change in trends, because it is etched into your being. Consider two individuals who both experience a significant professional failure. The first, operating with the hustle culture narrative, will likely frame the story later as "I failed, but I used that pain to fuel my comeback, and now my new company is worth twice as much." The adversity is a motivational tool, a dark chapter that makes the success story more compelling. The external metric is still the hero. The second, viewing life through a Stoic lens, might tell a different story. They would speak of how the failure taught them humility, how it forced them to examine their own overconfidence, how it deepened their empathy for others facing setbacks, and how they learned to find peace even when their plans lay in ruins. Their focus is on the internal curriculum the hardship provided. The first story says, "Suffer to get rich." The second says, "Suffer well to become good." One uses adversity as a ladder to climb to a higher platform. The other uses adversity as a chisel to sculpt a more resilient and virtuous soul. This distinction changes how you walk through difficult times. If you believe the only point of suffering is to achieve a future external reward, then the suffering itself is a meaningless, painful void you just want to escape. You white-knuckle your way through it, eyes fixed on a distant horizon, missing everything the journey itself is trying to teach you. But if you understand that the manner in which you endure is the entire point, then every moment of hardship becomes charged with potential meaning. You are not just waiting for the storm to pass, you are learning how to dance in the rain, not for an audience, but for the strength and grace the dance cultivates in you. The hustle narrative can leave people feeling like their past struggles were only justified if they led to spectacular success. The Stoic refrain offers a more profound solace. Your struggles were justified the moment you chose to face them with dignity, courage, and a commitment to learning. That internal victory stands complete, regardless of what the external world delivers next. You can find 1,000 videos online promising the Stoic morning routine for peak performance. The scene is almost always the same: a dark room, a 5 a.m. alarm, ice-cold water, and a grim-faced individual executing a brutal checklist before the sun rises. The voiceover speaks of discipline, of conquering the day, of building an empire before others have had their coffee. Marcus Aurelius is invoked, not for his meditations on justice or his humility as emperor, but for a soundbite about rising early to do the work of a human being, ripped from its context and weaponized for productivity. The original Stoic morning reflection was an internal exercise, a quiet checking of one's intentions and character against the standard of virtue. Are my goals aligned with nature? How can I serve the common good today? The modern version has stripped away all interiority. It is a performance of control, a ritual where the metric is how much discomfort you can endure and how many tasks you can crush before 9 a.m. The goal is not self-examination but output optimization. The early hour is not for peace, but for getting a head start in a race no one else agreed to run. This is hustle culture wearing a philosopher's mask, using the aesthetic of austerity to sell a deeper form of enslavement to the clock and the to-do list. Another common trope plucks quotes from Stoic texts to justify cutthroat business tactics. A line from Marcus Aurelius about accepting the acts of others as they are, meant to cultivate patience and understanding, is twisted into a rationale for cold-blooded negotiation, for viewing partners and competitors as mere objects in your strategic game. The profound Stoic teaching on emotional detachment, which aimed at freedom from destructive passions like rage and greed, is repackaged as a tactical advantage. Be emotionally detached, the modern guru says, so you can fire people without remorse, crush competitors without sympathy, and make decisions based solely on cold, hard numbers. This is a profound corruption. The Stoics sought Apatheia to avoid being controlled by anger or fear, to ensure their actions remained just and rational. The hustler seeks a simulated Apatheia to bypass empathy altogether, to remove the human friction that might slow down a transaction. One uses detachment to see people more clearly as fellow humans deserving of fairness. The other uses a caricature of detachment to see people more easily as instruments or obstacles. The original was a shield against internal vice. The distortion is a weapon for external exploitation. Look at the merchandise and social media graphics. The stern bust of Marcus Aurelius is slapped onto mugs and posters next to slogans like, "The obstacle is the way," but the accompanying message is rarely about inner transformation. It is almost always about bulldozing through external barriers to claim a prize. The iconography of resilience is used to sell the very grind that the philosophy sought to render peaceful. The Stoics saw obstacles as the raw material for practicing virtue. The modern interpretation often sees them as enemies to be annihilated for personal gain. The philosopher king who wrote of his duty to his fellow citizens is now a mascot for hyper-individualism, for winning at all costs. This is not a revival of ancient wisdom. It is a cultural appropriation of its symbols, draining them of their ethical core and filling them with the same old hunger for more. The language of the inner citadel is used to describe a fortress of solitude where you count your money, not a sanctuary of character that remains standing even if the money is gone. Each of these examples reveals the same pattern, a careful extraction of the tough-sounding parts, the discipline, the resilience, the focus on control, while the heart of the teaching, the commitment to justice, the cultivation of wisdom for its own sake, and the pursuit of a tranquility rooted in virtue, is left behind on the page. We are given the armor of Stoicism without the soul that was supposed to wear it, and then told this empty shell is the secret to a life of meaning. But a suit of armor with no one inside does not conquer anything. It just stands there, hollow and cold, waiting for a purpose it can no longer remember. The empty armor of hustle culture carries a heavy psychological price. When you mistake its frantic striving for stoic discipline, you are not building resilience, you are slowly dismantling your own well-being from the inside out. The first and most obvious symptom is chronic burnout, a state of utter exhaustion that feels like a permanent fog. This is not the natural tiredness that follows a period of hard work, it is a systemic collapse. It happens because the hustle mindset teaches you to view your human limits not as natural boundaries to respect, but as enemy lines to be crossed. Your need for rest, for recovery, for simple pleasure becomes an excuse, a sign of weakness in your personal war for productivity. You override your body's signals and your mind's pleas for a pause, believing that true strength lies in never stopping. But a machine run without maintenance will eventually break down, and so will you. The Stoic practice of knowing what is yours and what is not includes a clear-eyed understanding of your own energy and capacity. It asks for intelligent effort, not limitless expenditure. Authentic Stoic discipline is about managing your inner resources wisely so you can sustain the long journey of a virtuous life, not sprinting until you collapse at a finish line that keeps moving. Alongside this exhaustion lies a constant, low hum of anxiety. This anxiety is the direct result of the fundamental inversion we discussed, tying your self-worth to external outcomes you cannot fully control. When your value is measured by your revenue, your follower count, or your market position, you hand over the keys to your inner peace to a world that is inherently unstable. Every market dip feels like a personal failure. Every negative comment feels like a crack in your identity. Every competitor's success feels like a step backward in your own worth. You are on an emotional roller coaster you did not choose to ride, and the safety bar is never locked. The Stoic aim was the exact opposite, to build an inner citadel so secure that the storms outside could not rattle the foundation. By identifying the good solely with virtue, with your own choices and character, you anchor your worth in something no external event can take from you. The anxiety does not disappear because life becomes easy. It recedes because you are no longer betting your entire sense of self on an unpredictable game. Your value becomes a fact, not a fluctuating metric. Perhaps the most profound cost, however, is the emptiness that can follow what the world calls success. Imagine finally reaching that long-chased milestone, the financial target, the business sale, the viral recognition. You arrive at the summit you have been told your whole life would bring fulfillment, only to find it strangely hollow. The view is impressive, but a cold wind blows through you. This is because you were sold a destination, but never given a compass for the journey itself. You were taught to love the trophy, but not the game. The hustle narrative is entirely focused on the acquisition of the external prize. It says nothing about who you are supposed to become in the process, except perhaps more ruthless and efficient. So when you finally hold the prize, you are left with a silent question: is this all there is? You may have the trappings of success, but you lack the deep, resonant satisfaction of a life lived with purpose and integrity. The virtuous life was never the goal, so achieving the substitute goal feels, in the end, like a beautifully wrapped empty box. Authentic Stoic practice is the antidote to each of these wounds. It directly addresses the burnout by teaching you to live in accordance with your nature, which includes the need for restoration and the wisdom of knowing your limits. It cuts the root of anxiety by relentlessly redirecting your focus to the only thing that is truly good and truly yours, your character and your actions in the present moment. And it fills the existential emptiness by providing a purpose that cannot be exhausted by achievement, the lifelong project of cultivating wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. The hustle path asks you to exhaust yourself for a reward that may not satisfy you. The Stoic path offers a way of walking that is itself satisfying, regardless of the scenery. One leads to a destination that might disappoint you. The other transforms the very nature of the journey, making each step an opportunity for a different kind of wealth, one measured in peace, clarity, and a quiet strength that no market can crash. So how does this ancient wisdom actually look when you walk into the office on Monday morning? It begins with a quiet but radical redefinition of what your work is for. Instead of seeing your career as a ladder to climb for status or a vehicle to accumulate wealth, you start to view it as your particular station, your arena for practicing virtue. Your job, whatever it is, becomes the raw material. The goal is no longer to extract the most value from it for yourself, but to bring the most virtue to it. This means pursuing excellence in your craft not because it will get you a promotion, though it might, but because the act of doing something well with care and integrity is a form of wisdom in action. A Stoic software engineer finds satisfaction in writing clean, efficient code that serves the user well. A Stoic teacher focuses on the clarity and compassion they bring to a lesson. A Stoic manager measures their day not by tasks checked off, but by how justly they treated their team. The work itself becomes the practice ground. Every interaction is a chance to exercise fairness, every difficult project a chance to cultivate courage, every temptation to cut corners a chance to demonstrate temperance. You are not working for the weekend or the bonus. You are working to become a more skilled, more resilient human being through the daily demands of your profession. This shift immediately changes your relationship with time and effort. Hustle culture screams that more hours always equal more value. Stoic temperance asks a more discerning question. What is the sustainable, intelligent amount of effort this task requires for me to do it well without harming my health or neglecting other duties? It is the difference between the programmer who works a 16-hour crunch to meet an artificial deadline, producing buggy code, and the one who works a focused 8 hours, communicates constraints honestly, and delivers a stable product. The Stoic understands that burning out is not a badge of honor, it is a failure of self-management. Temperance here is about respecting your human limits so you can bring your best self to the work consistently, not in frantic, unsustainable bursts. It means guarding your time for rest and reflection as fiercely as your time for meetings, because you know that a depleted mind cannot make wise judgments or act with patience. Justice in the workplace transforms from a corporate policy into a personal discipline. It means actively considering the well-being of everyone your work touches. For a Stoic, this is not about being a pushover, it is about rational fairness. It is giving honest feedback to a colleague because it helps them grow, not because you want to undermine them. It is advocating for a fair price for a client because it reflects the true value of the service, not because you can squeeze the most from them. It is ensuring your team feels heard and respected because they are fellow rational beings sharing in a common effort, not resources to be depleted. When conflict arises, the Stoic does not default to seeing an enemy, but another person with their own perspective, to be understood and engaged with fairly. This just orientation builds trust and creates a work environment that is not just productive, but humane, recognizing that sustainable success is built on cooperation, not exploitation. Wealth and success, when they come, are then held with the light touch Seneca advised. A Stoic professional might earn a significant income, but they see it first as a responsibility. The question becomes, how can this resource be used well? This could mean ensuring financial security for your family, investing in the professional development of your team, supporting causes that align with your values, or simply having the freedom to choose projects that are meaningful over those that are merely lucrative. The money is a tool for creating stability and good, not an idol to be worshipped. This mindset protects you from the anxiety of market fluctuations. If your sense of worth is tied to using money wisely rather than simply having it, a downturn becomes a challenge for creative stewardship, not a personal catastrophe. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, is the practice of equanimity toward outcomes. You pour your best effort into a proposal, a project, a performance review. You act with all the skill and virtue you can muster, and then you release your grip on the result. The client might choose someone else, the promotion might go to a colleague. The launch might not go viral. The Stoic meets these outcomes not with despair or a frantic urge to hustle harder, but with a calm assessment. Did I act with excellence and integrity? If the answer is yes, then the external result, while perhaps disappointing, cannot touch the core of your achievement. You have already succeeded in the arena that matters, the arena of your own character. This equanimity is not passivity. It is the source of tremendous professional resilience. It allows you to learn from feedback without being crushed by it, to adapt to changing circumstances without panic, and to continue pursuing excellence for its own sake, not for the fleeting reward of applause. Your motivation becomes internal and renewable, drawn from the satisfaction of good work itself, not from the unpredictable approval of the market. In this way, a modern career stops being a relentless race toward a finish line and becomes a lifelong craft, where the true masterpiece is not the trophy on the shelf, but the integrity and skill of the artisan who made it. The ancient Stoics were not monks hiding from the world. They were senators, emperors, merchants, and soldiers, deeply engaged in the affairs of their time. They believed in action, in duty, in playing your part in the grand human project with energy and commitment. So ambition, in the right sense, was not just permitted, it was expected. But their definition of ambition would sound almost foreign to our modern ears. It was not a hunger for personal glory. It was a commitment to excellence in your role, directed by an unwavering moral compass. Think of it as a qualified yes. Yes, strive. Yes, build. Yes, contribute. But only if your striving is an expression of virtue, only if your building serves a purpose beyond yourself, and only if you can hold the outcome of your efforts with an open hand. This is ambition with a governor, a built-in check against its own potential to corrupt. The Stoic sage would look at your goals and ask not how big they are, but why you have them and who you must become to reach them. The hustle culture version skips these questions entirely. Its ambition is a rocket without a guidance system, celebrated for its raw power and trajectory, with little concern for where it might land or what it might destroy on the way up. It confuses motion for purpose. For the Stoic, ambition was meaningless unless it was in service to something greater than the self. Your duty, your role in your family, your community, your profession, this was the proper channel for your energy. A Stoic parent's ambition is to raise their children with wisdom and kindness. A Stoic carpenter's ambition is to master their craft and create things of lasting quality. A Stoic leader's ambition is to govern with justice. The ambition is directed outward toward the contribution. The modern, distorted version turns ambition inward toward the accumulation of personal validation. It asks, what can the world do for my brand? The Stoic asks, what can my skills do for the world? This outward focus acts as a natural check on ego. When your primary concern is the quality of your contribution, you are less likely to cut ethical corners because doing so would damage the work itself. You are less likely to be derailed by envy because you are not in a zero-sum race against others. You are in a personal pursuit of excellence within your own station. Your ambition becomes a quiet, steady dedication to getting better at what you do for the sake of the doing. This is where self-awareness becomes the critical governor. The Stoics practiced constant self-examination. Before charging toward a goal, they would pause to ask, is this pursuit in harmony with my nature and my duties? Am I capable of this? Is my desire for this rooted in a rational understanding of what is good? Or is it a passion, a craving for status or comfort disguised as a noble aim? This introspection prevents you from being swept away by the cultural current that says more is always better. It allows you to say no to a path that, while prestigious, would force you to compromise your values or neglect your responsibilities. Hustle culture often interprets self-awareness as knowing your strengths so you can exploit them more efficiently. The Stoic version includes a fearless inventory of your limits, your biases, and your vulnerabilities so you can navigate with humility and avoid the hubris that comes with unchecked striving. Finally, and this is the most difficult part for the modern mind to grasp, this qualified ambition requires a complete detachment from specific results. You must care deeply and yet not care at all. You care deeply about the quality of your effort, the integrity of your actions, the virtue you bring to the endeavor. You pour your heart into the work, but you cultivate indifference to whether that work brings you fame, fortune, or any particular reward. The outcome is not yours to command. It belongs to the complex web of external events. This is the ultimate test. Can you work tirelessly on a project that may never see the light of day, and still feel that your time was well spent because you grew in skill and patience? Can you campaign for a cause you believe in, even if it loses, and know your effort was just and therefore good? This detachment is not apathy. It is the source of tremendous creative freedom and resilience. It means you are not working for the applause, so you are free to do work that is true, even if it is unpopular. You are not working for the payout, so you are free to pursue ideas that are meaningful, even if they are not immediately profitable. Your ambition is no longer a chain that binds you to a future outcome, but a wind that fills your sails in the present moment. Hustle culture cannot comprehend this. Its entire economy is built on selling you a specific result, a promised land of success defined by metrics. It teaches you to attach your happiness, your identity, your worth to hitting those targets. This turns every endeavor into a high-stakes gamble with your self-esteem on the table. The Stoic reframes the entire game. The real victory is not in capturing the trophy, but in having fought well with honor and skill. The trophy is a preferred indifferent, a nice bonus. The fight itself, conducted with virtue, is the true and lasting good. So the next time you feel that pull of ambition, that desire to strive and build, do not suppress it. That energy is a gift, but before you charge forward, ask the Stoic questions. Is this ambition in service to something beyond myself? Am I aware of my limits and my motives, and can I commit to this work with my whole heart while leaving the result to the universe? That is the difference between an ambition that exhausts you and one that fulfills you, between a fire that burns out of control and a flame that gives steady, lasting light. The true measure of a day is not found on a dashboard. As dusk settled, a Stoic would engage in a quiet ritual far removed from checking sales numbers or social media analytics. This was the evening review, a deliberate and honest examination of the day, not for what was produced, but for how one had lived. The questions were simple yet profound. Where did I act with justice today? When did fear prevent courage? Did my desires govern me, or did my reason? This was not an audit of efficiency, but an appraisal of character. The goal was moral progress, the slow, steady alignment of one's actions with virtue. There were no quotas to hit, only a conscience to consult. In the silence of reflection, the only metric that carried weight was the integrity of a choice, the fairness of a word, the patience exercised in a moment of frustration. Success was a quiet nod from your own soul, acknowledging you had navigated the day's trials with a little more wisdom than the day before. Now hold that image beside the modern nightly ritual. The glow of a screen illuminates a different set of questions. How many new followers? What was the conversion rate? Did the revenue graph tick upward? This is the hustle culture review, a relentless tabulation of output. The focus is exclusively external, a compilation of data points that exist outside of you. Your value becomes a derivative of these numbers, a calculation that fluctuates with every market swing and algorithm change. One practice turns you inward toward the only thing you truly own. The other turns you outward toward a marketplace of validation you cannot control. The evening review asks, did I live well? The performance review asks, did I win? This distinction reveals the ultimate purpose of each system. The Stoic uses reflection to cultivate an inner citadel, a self that remains unshaken by external praise or blame. The daily review is the maintenance of that fortress, checking for cracks in the walls of temperance or weaknesses in the gates of courage. It is a personal, private accounting meant to strengthen you for whatever tomorrow brings, regardless of fortune's favor. The hustle habit of tracking key performance indicators, however, is designed to optimize you for one thing only: greater external yield. It trains your attention on the harvest, while the Stoic practice tends to the health of the soil itself. Imagine two gardeners at the end of the day. The first walks their plot slowly, feeling the soil, noting which plants seem strong, which need support where the water pooled effectively. They are in conversation with the life of the garden. The second gardener rushes to the edge of the field with a notepad, counting only the number of ripe vegetables, comparing it to yesterday's count, and plotting a steeper growth curve for tomorrow. One is engaged in stewardship, the other is engaged in extraction. The evening review is that act of stewardship for your own character. It acknowledges that some days the harvest of external results will be meager, but the cultivation of patience during a drought or fairness in distributing resources is a yield of a different, more enduring kind. When you judge your day solely by what you produced, you risk missing the subtle, vital growth happening beneath the surface. A day where you listen patiently to a struggling colleague may not advance any project metric, but it is a masterclass in the virtue of justice. A day where you walked away from a lucrative but dishonest opportunity shows a growth in temperance that no revenue chart can capture. The hustle mindset, blind to these internal victories, would mark such a day as unproductive. The Stoic, through reflection, recognizes it as a day of profound success. This is why, for the Stoics, virtue was the only metric that ultimately mattered. It was the universal currency of a good life, spendable in any circumstance. Wealth could be lost, reputation smeared, health broken, but a character forged through daily examination remained a possession no misfortune could steal. Your follower count cannot comfort you in a moment of grief, but your practiced courage can. Your quarterly earnings cannot give you peace on a sleepless night, but a clear conscience, reviewed and upheld each evening, can. The evening review gently disentangles your sense of worth from the roller coaster of external results and reattaches it to the steady ground of your own choices. It asks you to find your dignity not in what the world gives you, but in what you give to the world, measured in acts of integrity, not units of output. So tonight, when the devices are powered down and the noise of the day fades, try a different kind of accounting. Ask not what you crossed off your list, but what you added to your character. That quiet conversation in the dark is where you build a self that no amount of success can corrupt, and no amount of failure can diminish. His letters reveal a man deeply aware of the weight of his own fortune. Seneca wrote extensively about the dangers of wealth, warning that it could easily become a master rather than a servant. He described the rich man as carrying a heavy load, one that required tremendous care to bear without being crushed. This was not theoretical for him. He practiced what he called voluntary hardship, setting aside days to live on simple food and rough clothing, not as a performance, but as a deliberate exercise in holding his comfort lightly. He needed to remind himself constantly that the luxury surrounding him was not essential to his peace. His philosophy was not a set of rules he followed after achieving success. It was the daily navigation system he used to travel through that success without losing his way. He understood that the greatest threat to a Stoic in a palace was not poverty, but corruption, the slow, quiet erosion of character that can come when every desire is easily met. His writings are filled with this tension, a man counseling simplicity from within a life of extreme abundance, and that very tension makes his insights more powerful, not less. He proves that Stoicism is not an escape from the world, but a way to move through its complexities with your eyes open. His ultimate fate adds a final, poignant layer to this case. Despite his wealth and his philosophical writings, Seneca found himself entangled in the dangerous politics of the Roman imperial court. He was accused of involvement in a conspiracy against the Emperor Nero, a former student he had once advised. The allegations led to his forced passing. Here was a man who had mastered the theory of facing misfortune with tranquility, now facing the ultimate test. Historical accounts suggest he met his end with the calm courage his philosophy espoused, surrounding himself with his friends and discussing profound ideas until the final moment. This ending complicates the hustle culture fantasy of Stoic success entirely. Seneca had the wealth, the influence, the intellectual legacy, every external marker of a life conquered. Yet his story is not one of untroubled triumph. It is a story of constant philosophical vigilance within a morally ambiguous world, of using wisdom to manage the burdens of privilege, and of virtue being tested in the most final way possible. His life shows that the real Stoic work is not about acquiring a peaceful life, but about practicing peace within whatever life you have, whether it is one of hardship, opulence, or profound political danger. The goal was never to arrive at a safe harbor where the storms stop, but to learn to sail with steady grace through every kind of weather. This deeper engagement begins with a simple but profound shift in our relationship with the texts themselves. We must stop treating the writings of Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus as a quarry for convenient, stand-alone quotes. A line lifted from the Meditations and slapped onto a productivity app is like taking a single, beautiful brushstroke from a vast mural and declaring you understand the entire painting. The power of Stoicism is not in these isolated fragments, but in the complete, interconnected system they form. It is a worldview, a logical architecture built on foundational principles about nature, reason, and human purpose. To extract a piece without understanding the whole is to miss the supporting structure that gives it meaning and prevents it from being twisted into its opposite. The call to focus on what you can control becomes a stressful mantra for domination unless you first understand the Stoics' radical, liberating definition of what control actually is. That definition only makes sense within the broader teachings on virtue, externals, and living in accordance with nature. We have been sold the brushstrokes and told they are the masterpiece, and so we miss the grandeur and coherence of the actual work. This is why the real antidote to shallow Stoicism is not more commentary, but a direct, patient encounter with the source material. Pick up a copy of Epictetus's Discourses. You will not find a list of 10 life hacks. You will find a relentless, sometimes frustrating, dialogue where a former slave dismantles his students' faulty assumptions about where the good life is found. Read Seneca's Letters from a Stoic. They are not bullet points on resilience. They are meandering, deeply personal explorations of friendship, anger, grief, and the use of time. written to a real person navigating a real life. Open the Meditations and you are not reading a published treatise, but the private journal of the most powerful man on earth, wrestling with his own temper, his duties, and his mortality. In these original texts, you meet the philosophy in its native habitat, complete with its nuances, its contradictions, and its profound humanity. You see Marcus Aurelius chastise himself for sleeping in. You hear Seneca admit his own struggles with anger. You witness Epictetus's sarcastic humor when a student offers a weak excuse. This context is everything. It transforms Stoicism from a cold, impersonal system of rules into a living conversation across centuries, a record of brilliant minds doing the hard, messy work of applying reason to the chaos of human experience. The popular, branded version of Stoicism asks very little of you. It offers a slogan, a morning routine, a mindset tweak. It is a product designed for quick consumption and easier living. The philosophy itself, however, asks for much more. It asks for the hard work of sustained study, of sitting with difficult concepts, of examining your own life with uncomfortable honesty. It is not a set of answers, but a method of inquiry. The original Stoics were not giving pep talks. They were training their students in a discipline of thought. When Epictetus said, "First, learn the meaning of what you say," he was issuing a challenge that cuts to the heart of our modern predicament. We love to repeat the obstacle is the way or amor fati, but have we truly learned their meaning? Have we traced these ideas back to their roots in the Stoic physics of a rational cosmos, or their connection to the acceptance of a fate we cannot control? Without that depth, the phrases are just empty shells capable of being filled with any meaning, including the very anxiety and striving they were meant to cure. Choosing depth over slogans is in essence a rebellion against the noise of our own culture. It is a quiet commitment to understanding over appearing knowledgeable, to integrity over image. When you engage with Stoicism as a philosophy, you are not arming yourself with better branding for your personal hustle. You are slowly recalibrating your entire sense of what is good, what is important, and what a life well lived actually requires. The work is internal, slow, and often invisible. There is no certificate, no follower milestone, no revenue target that marks your progress. The only metric is the gradual alignment of your judgments and actions with a wisdom that feels less like a conquest and more like a homecoming. It is the difference between wearing the armor and forging it yourself, link by careful link, in the fires of your own reflection. That is the real journey, one that begins not with a motivational quote, but with the turning of a page and the willingness to listen to an ancient, demanding, and ultimately freeing conversation. The Final Inversion is now complete. What began as a philosophy of inner peace has been repackaged as a manual for outer conquest. The modern hustle interpretation of Stoicism is not a revival, but a reversal. It takes a system designed to make you immune to fortune's whims and turns it into a system that makes you perpetually vulnerable to them. It swaps the ultimate goal of virtue for the endless chase of preferred indifference. It trades the tranquility of living in accordance with nature for the exhausting war of trying to dominate it. This is not an evolution of the idea. It is its photographic negative where every light has become a shadow. The real Stoics did not offer a faster horse to win the race. They offered a way to find contentment whether you were riding, walking, or watching from the sidelines, because the quality of your soul was never determined by your position on the track. Stoicism, in its authentic form, is not a tool for achieving worldly success. It is a framework for evaluating what success even means. It asks the deeper, quieter question that hustle culture is designed to help you avoid: what is a good life? And it answers with a clarity that can feel unsettling to a culture obsessed with metrics. A good life is one lived with wisdom, courage, justice, and self-command. It is a life in harmony with your own rational nature and the nature of the world around you. It is a life where your worth is an internal fact, not an external variable. This framework works just as well in a small apartment as it does in a corner office, in times of plenty as in times of loss. Its power lies precisely in its independence from circumstance. The hustle culture version sells you a ladder and tells you your value is your height. The Stoic asks you to consider the integrity of the ground you are standing on, regardless of its elevation. So the real choice is not between ambition and apathy. It is between two different compasses. One points forever outward toward a horizon of more, a destination defined by accumulation and comparison. The other points steadily inward toward a north star of character, a direction defined by who you are in the midst of whatever you are doing. The first compass keeps you in a state of perpetual journey, always needing the next milestone to feel you have arrived. The second offers a sense of arrival in every mindful step because the path itself is the destination. The hustle narrative tells you to build a taller tower so you can see further. The Stoic asks you to cultivate a clearer vision so you can see the truth of your place in the world from right where you are. This is an invitation, then, not to a new routine, but to a different kind of reflection. Before you adopt another life hack branded with a philosopher's name, pause. Ask yourself what you are truly optimizing for. Is it the peace of a mind at ease with itself, or the anxiety of a mind forever measuring its distance from a moving target? The next time you feel the familiar pull of that grinding pressure, the voice insisting you must do more, be more, have more, remember the alternative. You have permission to tend to your character instead of your profile, to value your integrity over your influence, and to find enough in the virtuous act itself without needing the world to applaud. The real work of philosophy was never about changing the world first. It was about understanding yourself clearly, so that whatever you choose to do in the world, you do it from a place of wholeness, not lack. That is the quiet, subversive, and deeply practical promise that has waited undisturbed for 2,000 years within the pages of a true Stoic text, ready for anyone who stops hustling long enough to listen.